February 9th, 1964 was a historic day. The Beatles made their U.S. television debut on The Ed Sullivan Show, in an event that broke every record for U.S. television ratings at the time. Success in the United States had not been easy to come by for any British group to this point, and coming to America was quite a risky business venture for many British rock groups. In the case of the Beatles, it seems that it was a little bit of a case of luck and some managerial skill, as you'll see. Apparently, Ed Sullivan happened to be traveling through Heathrow Airport in London in 1963 at the exact same time the Beatles were returning from a recent tour of Scandinavia. Ed Sullivan happened to see the thousands of people that were there to catch just a glimpse of the Beatles, as the UK was going through the Beatlemania phenomenon at the time. And he looked at it and thought that it was very similar to the public reaction that surrounded Elvis Presley's debut in the mid-50s. Sullivan gets in contact with the Beatles' manager, Brian Epstein, and offers him a large sum for the Beatles to come and do one performance on the show. But Epstein had other ideas. He brokered a deal with Sullivan over dinner one night in New York City for the Beatles to come and do the Ed Sullivan Show for 3 consecutive weeks. The Sullivan Show aired on Sunday evenings, and they would come for 3 consecutive weeks, and they would have top billing on every show, and they would also get 2 segments on each show, one at the beginning of the show, one at the end. And normally this would never work, but Epstein charged a very, very small fee for this service. So Sullivan thought it was a good deal, and he took the deal. But Epstein really knew that the exposure on U.S. television was going to be worth far more than any sum of money that they would make from performing 1, 2, or 3 concerts on the Sullivan Show. He knew it was going to lead to something bigger. So also in 1963, Epstein was also brokering deals with Capitol Records to help get the Beatles' first records that had already been released in the UK released here in America. And it took a little while. It took some persistence on his part, but once the deal was finalized, the song I Want to Hold Your Hand was leaked out to radio DJs, and they started playing the song on the radio in advance of the record's upcoming release. And so the Beatles had, all the stars were aligning for them. They had a #1 hit here in the U.S. just before their big debut on The Sullivan Show. And so these performances on The Sullivan Show kicked off the Beatlemania phenomenon in the U.S., which was a great distraction for the American people from the events of the past 6 months, in particular the assassination of John F. Kennedy in November of 1963, which was still fresh on the minds of many Americans, and America needed a distraction, and the Beatles provided that. The Beatles performed on Ed Sullivan live from New York City on February 9th, 1964, live again the next week on February 16th from Miami, Florida. Sullivan had taken his show on the road that week, and a final time on February 23rd, which was a performance that had been pre-taped before their first performance even. The Beatles then returned about a year and a half later and performed on the show one last time in August of 1965, where they performed songs from their album and their film, Help. The Beatles' stardom was well established by this point. Beatlemania was going all across the United States, and this was due in large part to the Ed Sullivan Show.